Listeners, we have an emergency. The price of little white paper masks has shot through the roof, so we urgently need you to get online and donate handsomely to the Unsung podcast in order that we might stay alive, because for the next few months we're all going to be quarantined inside our own homes, and you're going to need us to keep you sane or insane.
Yeah, now's our time to shine.
Yeah, we are here for you, but only if you help us buy so many white paper masks that we become the kings of the mask bracket.
And you can do that how, Mark?
You can go to Unsung. No, you can't. You can go to patreon.com/unsung. We have a number of different tiers, which we should probably change up soon, actually, now I think about it. But what we've got is quite good.
We should probably just honour the first one.
Yeah, I mean, we should definitely do that. So you can go to, like I said, that website, patreon.com/unsungpod, and just have a wee browse, and if you fancy having a wee bit of banter before the episodes come out on air, you can get them on Fridays instead of Mondays if you join us, and people actually comment on them as well, which is really nice. So yeah, I think you should go and do that.
See you there.
Bye.
Hey folks, Chris is dying, Weaver is dying, I'm actually in another room in a
we're all separately quarantined.
He's in a hermetically sealed studio and he's staying there until 2022.
Exactly, that's the plan. I'm stocked up in canned food. I have a latrine in the corner. It's going to be great.
We got him 2 big boxes of Frey Bentos steak and kidney pies.
God damn.
And one of the wee mini ovens.
Is that what's in that box? Fuck. Oh man, I might need to come out, guys.
Frey Bentos. I can hear my dad running up the motorway now just because I said it.
I melted some vinyl flooring in a kitchen with a Frey Bentos pie. Perfectly circular pie hole.
Is that the lyrics from a Nails song, Dave?
Yeah, it is actually.
That's pretty solid.
When was the last time you had a Frey Bentos pie, Dave?
Oh, I don't know. I've only had like maybe 2 or 3 in my life.
That's what put
it was probably like probably like 12 years ago. The chicken curry one was the best, I think, but
I've never had one, so
it's good to hear the word best used in relation to Frey Bentos.
I mean,
the least worst.
Also, it's really interesting that Frey Bentos is actually like a beautiful tropical South American city, but somehow we've named a pie after it.
I had no idea that was a thing.
I thought it was a man.
No, Frey Bentos is a place.
2-second names like Bob Frey and Ian Bentos had a pie shop that made really bad slimy pies. You ever taken a Frey Bentos pie out and really examined it before you cooked it?
Absolutely not.
It's like a pregnant pie had a miscarriage.
Oh my god,
it's horrendous.
For the benefit of our international audience, Frey Bentos pies are basically what Chris has said.
Yeah, it's like just indeterminate meat and gravy, and it comes in a metal tin, and then it's got like an uncooked pastry as well. So you take the top off and then put it in the oven for like 40 minutes or something, and it makes a pie. But they're well, yeah, exactly. It's not gourmet food, shall we say.
Still tell you, my dad's slavering right now. His ears are burning, and he's.
You better take your phone. He might text you.
Absolutely, like people at that age just love that shit, man. They lap it up. It's like food rationing, in the war.
Gammon.
Digging through the rubble. By the way, after this coronavirus has its way with us, that kind of stuff will be like currency. We'll be trading our firstborn for a Frey Bentos curry pie.
One of my people at my work was saying that there's somewhere in, I think, in the Far East where they would see if you order takeout food. I guess a coronavirus country, they'll come with the food and leave it at your door. And then walk away, and on it will have the temperature of the person that cooked the food and the temperature of the person that delivered the food. That's going to happen. That's our immediate future.
Great, I'm into it.
The time it takes to get all that information, your delivery time's going to go right up because we're just cooking your dinner.
I know, getting a free pen tossed by.
So aside for this this educational sidebar that we've done here, we've got a couple of bits of news for listeners.
Yeah, so some poor soul decided that we should be on the radio.
The radio, the real radio.
The FM radio.
FM radio.
This is like when Pinocchio became a real boy and then regretted it.
As we refer to it sometimes in Scotland as the tranny, which is not as offensive as it sounds. The transistor radio, we're going to be not on that, we're going to be digital radio, which is significantly different.
Digital tranny.
Yeah, digital tranny, yeah. So, yeah, we're going to be on Rocksport radio. It's rocksport.tv for anyone that is interested.
From further afield, but it has an FM number.
Yes.
It is
Which
on
obviously
FM
we
around
know.
the Glasgow area, but it's also DAB as well.
Yeah,
DAB.
so anywhere in the UK you can hear it, and you'll be able to hear it online as well. We're not doing this though, like it's not going to be like this show.
It's a variation on the theme.
Yeah, we're going to be basically talking about a rock band of well, not necessarily our favourites, but just a band that gives us enough places to go that we can play some of their tracks.
And a band that hopefully people want to hear something about.
Yeah, exactly. But then also tracks by people that influenced them, that have been influenced by them, play their peers. So we're going to have 2 hours a week.
Yeah, it's like the solar system around a core band. So we'll pick a group and then we'll kind of, a few of their more striking songs and people that came before and after and peers, contemporaries, all that kind of stuff. Kind of a variation in this theme, maybe with a little bit less chatter and a bit more music because it is the radio after all.
Yeah.
But that's starting, we think, a week
tomorrow.
A week tomorrow, which is
no, it will be tomorrow.
No, this is this crossover time.
We're recording on Tuesday, the 3rd of March. So we'll be coming out on Tuesday the 10th of March. I think will be our first show.
Yeah, 10 p.m.
10 p.m.
Yeah,
until midnight.
10 p.m. till 12.
Stay tuned to the socials, and we'll make sure that the proper details are all up there and it's all confirmed, and we're not leading you all astray.
Yeah,
but that's happening.
It's very exciting. It'll be interesting to see if we can not swear for 2 hours.
I mean, there is no fucking way that's happening.
But yeah, I'm excited. I don't know about you guys. I think it'll be fun.
I know, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it'll be good fun, and I'm looking forward to the tweaking the theme because it just means more tunes and no editing for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. And the second bit of news next week.
Speaking of editing,
going to do a little bit of a special episode. So we're going to start kind of sort of semi-regularly bringing in other voices in the show. Shock horror, we're going to have some women.
Oh man!
I mean, so guys,
you didn't run that by me.
It is difficult being a white male in this world, but we're going to bring our good friend Anna Goldthorpe, who is a bit of an encyclopedia of garage and punk.
Yep.
She's going to join us next week. Mark, would you care to furnish the listeners? We're just doing this back to front now. Care to furnish the listeners with the album that is going to be discussed?
So we're going to do Static Age by the Misfits. Which is a record I enjoy quite a lot, so I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Yeah, it's a contentious one, and both Mark and Anna, we set them up in a private chat, and it just got out of control as the two of them started throwing opinions back and forward. So I'm sure it'll be animated, and David and I will get to have a wee rest.
Yeah, that's fine.
Kick back with our sparkly water. But yeah, that's next week. We're going to be a foursome. We're going to start doing things like that a wee bit more often, and see how it goes. This week, however, nobody needs to know really what we got up to in our private lives this week.
Can I just say I went to see Big Thief last night?
All right.
And they're a very good band.
That's cool.
They're like genuinely like a mix between Patti Smith, the band, and modern female rock.
Modern female
rock. I really like that genre. But you know how we were talking when we did Sharon Van Etten, and like there's a whole sort of like amazing range of stuff like that. Well, Big Thief just are fucking knocking it out of the park. They released 2 of the best albums of last year, and then last night to a sold out Fruit Market they did like 5 new songs as well on top. Yeah, and they're just so fucking tight. A proper rock band. And they also took Ithaca.
Ithaca are fucking superb.
Yeah, a London metalcore band on tour, just because they're like, fuck it, we can take whoever we want on tour. And so there were very many frightened hipsters last night watching Ithaca. But
were you one of them?
No, I wanted more mosh. I was like, there's not enough grindcore happening here. But I have to say, Big Thief, fucking, they're one of these bands that gets a lot of kind of indie hype.
That's why I'm giving you my squint eye.
Yeah, but they genuinely deserve it. Like,
okay, cool.
Knock it out of the park.
Yeah, not everyone's a waste of hype.
I think his new album, debut album, The Language of Injury, is also very, very good.
Yeah, very good.
On Holy Road Records. Great band.
Seeing as we're clearly on the topic of modern female rock,
Yeah,
Yes, like
the genre.
I've chosen Pod by The Breeders. Which I guess is one of the precursors for all
modern
female rock, if you want to be as patronising as possible. But no, I mean, I think one thing that did occur to me when we were doing this was just the sheer volume of bands, and especially I think bands with young women and non-male members primarily, that have, I think, as well as stylistically, just aesthetically been influenced by this band, because they make a lot of creative decisions during their career that seem to have empowered a generation of people that weren't really interested in the machismo of rock, and it opened up a lot more possibilities in the genre and welcomed in a whole host of other people. We'll just dig into this album a wee bit, because there's quite a lot to say about it, or at least about the context of it and what came around it. Just off the bat, before we do the history 5 minutes here, were you guys familiar with Breeders much?
Cannonball is the only thing I'd really heard.
Yeah, not really. I mean, I'd seen her do a solo thing.
Yes, we both saw that happen.
ATP in like 2012.
It's
when it
fucking
was
terrible.
Absolutely awful.
Oh, it was horrendous, and it was infuriating, because there was so much sycophancy in the venue for Kim Deal when she did that, and it was genuinely abysmal.
Yeah.
Why? Why was it so bad?
So it was just her playing acoustic, and it was just shite songs, no patter.
It was very hesitant, and it was like no real personality. The songs were weak. The playing was pretty unremarkable. It was such a fucking Emperor's New Clothes moment. Honestly, it really was. And I mean, that's going to, I'll mention that later on in the show actually. But I was massively disappointed by it, and infuriated by the level of cretinary around me. I felt it was like, we're not doing that. This lady is amazing at music. We're not doing her any favours by pretending this is in any way acceptable by her standards.
And then, like, I've seen the Pixies, and I know the Pixies, obviously. Yeah. So, there you are. But I'd never really got into them. The Breeders, I mean. Never really got into the Pixies either.
Pretty much the same.
I got pretty into the Pixies. I actually worked backwards, so I got into them from Death 2. I didn't really get into them from the kind of old school stuff, but then kind of really started to warm to them. And I have to be honest, I actually there's a lot of like Pixies compilations of outtakes and stuff like that, and I think I like them as much as any one given album. But we'll talk about them quite a bit as well as we go. So clearly Kim Deal was the bassist of the Pixies, like the definitive lineup, although I think like Paisley Shanton's now the confirmed permanent member. The Pixies had a couple of kind of separations and reformations. So Kim Deal was in the Pixies, and meanwhile, and we'll come to the reasons why exactly she chose to do this other project, but she formed this group in 1989, the Breeders, with Tanya Donnelly, who was also in a band called Throwing Muses, Josephine Wiggs on bass, who was from a band called Perfect Disaster, I think. Britt Walford played drums on their first on the album we're discussing today, and that was at the recommendation of Steve Albini, because they didn't have a drummer.
Of Slint.
So we'll go through all these people and give you a little bit of background, and the violinist Carrie Bradley sort of completed that early sort of lineup, and later on when they brought out their second album, Last Splash, which is the one that Cannonball's on, the one that most people know, Kelly Deal, Kim's sister, was invited into the band instead of Tanya Donnelly, who'd moved on to start a band called Belly, who were also a kind of like sort of mainstream fuzzy power pop rock kind of band. Kelly Deal couldn't play guitar. Frankly, she didn't play guitar.
And she had never played it before.
And Kim wanted her in the band and taught her to play guitar for the purposes of the Breeders, which is no small ask. Also, because Britt Walford had joined purely for that first record. He was replaced by Jim McPherson, who became the sort of de facto permanent drummer of the Breeders, albeit there's been a couple of changes on the way. To give just a bit of background, as Mark was it Mark or David? I don't even know which one of you mentioned Slint there, but
Dave.
Britt was from Slint, who were, I mean, hot shit at the time, and I think, to be honest, still hot shit, especially as of Spiderland. Steve Albini had recorded Slint, and Steve Albini had recommended Britt for the role of drumming on that record. Josephine Wiggs, who I mentioned, was in The Perfect Disaster. Two members of that band, by the way, went on to form that band, The Fields and the Nephilim.
Goth favourites.
Yeah, goth favourites. Tanya Donnelly was in Throwing Muses, which is a band from Rhode Island that was jointly started by the artist Kristen Hirsch. And if you want a rough idea what Throwing Muses sound like, the band Sleeper ripped off Throwing Muses Kinnicky to some extent as well. They were a very accessible kind of pre-Weezer power pop act. Yeah, and we mentioned she went on to do Belly after that. But the lineup in the Breeders has fluctuated quite a bit, including there was also a kind of period where they became another band entirely between 95 and 96 called The Amps. We'll touch on that. But the main reason that seems to have been behind the idea to start the Breeders is that Kim Deal felt really unfulfilled as a songwriter within the Pixies. Now, she'd written Gigantic. Which is one of the Pixies' best known songs and arguably one of their strongest songs. It was the only single of Surfer Rosa, and just really iconic bit of music for the band. She then wrote the one track Silver, which was on Doolittle, which was in the follow up to that album in '89. The only other thing she actually wrote and recorded for Pixies was a song called Bamthwalk, which came out in 2004 as a standalone single. By the way, Bamthwalk, maybe I'm ruining someone's nexus here, but it was written specifically for the Shrek 2 soundtrack and then didn't actually get on the soundtrack. It's a really good song actually, but it didn't make it onto the Shrek 2 soundtrack. So the Shrek 2...
There you are, that's quite a fall from grace really, isn't it?
It must have been so spoiled for choice that they didn't get an original Pixies tune onto their soundtrack. It's like, fucking hell, that's a bit much. But yeah, so it stemmed from Kim Deal's dissatisfaction or lack of involvement in Pixies. You know, Black Francis, or Frank Black as he went on to be known as, notoriously sort of in charge of that band, and the band evolved increasingly away from a group effort to, you know, by the time they brought out Trompe Le Monde, it was effectively Frank Black's debut solo album, and they split in 1993 acrimoniously. The drummer oh Jesus man, the drummer in Pixies was was informed that his band was over by fax.
I mean, that is a fucking great 90s firing. And I think prior to that anyway, since about 1990, from Bossa Nova onwards, the Pixies became a bit straighter in their songwriting. I mean, Doolittle is even looking back at the track listing in Doolittle, it's just astonishing. The consistency of that record. There's about 7 legendary tunes in that one album.
I want you to know, girl, it's so groovy. I want you to know, don't know about you, but I am Moonshine and Lucia. I am Moonshine and Lucia.
Bossa Nova, it's not bad, but it doesn't really have anything like as many truly standout classics from that era. Likewise with Trompe Le Monde, although by no standards are they bad albums, but I think they were not what Pixies lovers wanted. They wanted something a bit more whimsical, they wanted something with a bit more personality and character. And I think what's really been borne out over the years is that the certainly one of the reasons I chose Pod, is that the tunes that Kim Deal was writing at that time had a lot of the elements that people came to find missing or absent from the Pixies' later work.
Yeah.
And by Trompe Le Monde, she was very, very scarcely involved in the process of that band as well, even down to the singing, because she had singing songs that she hadn't written, and some of her bass work on a lot of the songs was really key to the appeal of the songs as well, but she became more and more of a background feature. Meanwhile, the stuff that she was writing with her own group, with the Breeders, was getting better and better. And by the time she brought out Last Splash, the songwriting was so fully developed that this was around the period when Pixies were splitting up anyway. And I think there's definitely a sense of the Pixies were losing their way. And I have no idea, I can't get any insight into Frank Black's psyche at that time, but he possibly felt a bit threatened by it, because they were the toast of the town, and Cannonball was a big single for the Breeders off of that album. They were the band that a lot of people were talking about at that time.
I mean, we go back to them a lot for like the official stamp of approval. I'm thinking specifically Melvin's, but Kurt Cobain fucking loved the Breeders, and he specifically said that the songwriting that Kim was doing was really missed on the Pixies, and that he really appreciated the stuff that she brought to the table. And the Breeders for him were everything that the Pixies were losing, really. Yeah, totally.
It's a phenomenon that's been observed countless times, especially by people that are really fond of both bands, and I don't think it's any coincidence. Now, the Breeders, in their own way, if we're going to take a spin through their back catalogue, started to lose their direction, in my opinion. Although in a slightly more unorthodox way, the Pixies seemed to get straighter, and the Breeders at one point got slightly more obscure. Pod was obviously the first one in 1990. Last Splash was the follow-up, which I think is 93, is that right?
Yeah,
93. It was, I think it was like released 7 months after the Pixies last played together, something like that. It went platinum. The Cannonball video was a great asset to that album, because it was, first of all, it was directed by Spike Jonze and Kim Gordon, which gave it double cool points, not least in retrospect, as Spike Jonze went to become more and more renowned. The Divine Hammer video was actually shot by both of them and a third person as well. I can't remember who that was. But that song alone, Cannonball, was just this hit cult 90s anthem. If you're compiling best songs of the 90s, it's definitely a contender in there. And it's also, it demonstrates some really unusual songwriting. The construction of it, where it starts in the bar, how the song just gets underway.
The reggae song.
The stops, the drops, the cut-ins, like, it's just such an innovatively structured bit of music.
Yeah, well, you can see that, when we talk about Pod, you'll see that she's definitely starting to explore weird and slightly off-kilter song structures within the sort of basic rock format. And then, I mean, Campbell just has a very, very hummable tune, and it's totally one of those classic 90s indie anthems, really, yeah.
And there's some aspects of the best Pixie stuff had that unorthodoxy. So Monkey Gone to Heaven is a good example.
Got killed by 10 million pounds of sludge from New York and New Jersey.
Tame, even just the point in the bar that the song starts at, it doesn't start at the sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, let's go. It starts midway through something. It starts at a point that leaves you guessing where you are in the bar for the first little while.
Hips like Cinderella. Must be having a good shame. Talking sweet about nothing.
And they did it like Debaser. It's got some really interesting structures in it, some interesting kind of accents and timing in it. And I think those elements were something that Kim really continued with, whereas the Pixie stuff did get straighter and more 4/4. And it's definitely to the benefit especially the last Splash album. I mean, it's a tremendous album. I don't necessarily know if we could nominate it for Unsung, other than the fact that it's maybe under-acknowledged on the whole within the 90s.
Yeah, but it's definitely their biggest record.
By a million miles, absolutely. It's interesting that on that album as well, so the track No Aloha, this was a year before Weezer came out with the Blue Album, and when you listen to that track, it is clearly the precursor to what would form the explosion behind Weezer, the saturated power pop, the buoyancy of it. There's so many aspects of that song that are clearly make it a progenitor of that sound. This album also in the fullness of the production, the lushness of it, I think set the scene for a number of bands and a couple of iterations beyond, such as bands like Giant Drag. who I think use a lot of the formula, maybe mixed with a touch more of Throwing Muses, and bands like Veruca Salt. And the Veruca Salt, especially early on, were sort of midway between this and maybe L7. The slightly harder, more kind of sneery edge, but there was certainly a lot of this kind of melody in there. Then you've got tracks like number 10, Divine Hammer, the other single, which is just, it's a brilliant song.
I'm just looking for the divine hammer. One divine hammer. One divine hammer.
And really is that sugar pop vibe that it's a bit more akin to stuff like Belly as well. Also, the interesting fact that I thought you might have picked up on, David, and you may well have with your Liam Howlett haircut, is that track 11, SOS, is the guitar sample from Firestarter.
It is indeed.
Yeah. But a hugely influential album, I think, across the board, and continues to be. It's stood the test of time really, really well as maybe any other 90s alternative record. I think also, I was trying to kind of put my finger on this intangible thing about Breeders at this stage, or the Breeders at this stage in their career, and I got to thinking about Kelly Deal. So Kelly Deal comes into this band that is, first of all, Kim Deal is a big deal.
Yeah.
They've already got a following. They've already got a strong album. They're getting huge plaudits from like Cobain and Albini. They have a buzz and they have a following, and they're clearly going to get on any number of big tours. It's a lot of pressure for someone that's never played guitar. And what seemed to happen with the songwriting, and one of the things that I think informs that kind of intangible magic about them, is that the song structures are quite often quite unusual or a little bit unorthodox in subtle ways, but the actual parts are quite straightforward. So it had to be something that Kelly could play. That's not to say that, she had to learn these kind of unusual progressions and the sequencing of the tracks, but the parts within that had to be quite simplistic. So there's a really nice balance between the simplicity of the writing mixed with innovation. And I think you can only, when you're bringing someone into a band that is so far behind you in the experience scale, but you want them to be able to keep up. I mean, it's not someone you're just going to get rid of, it's your sister. It does really affect what you can do, but in a way it made them work within kind of creative limitations that produced something pretty special. I can't really imagine what it's like to go into such a high pressure situation, like a band as big as that, as prominent as that at that point, being so...
I feel like that every time I come and record the podcast.
Thanks, David. Now, after the kind of tour cycle and promotional cycle and stuff of Last Splash died down, Breeders sort of kind of took a hiatus, and I think Kim basically started this thing called the Amps.
Yeah.
Well, I believe that there was
there was
Perhaps
heroin
a
involved.
large drugs bust was involved.
Yeah, so Kelly was. So that's how you deal with a high pressure situation. You know what I mean? Like
Heroin.
heroin.
David, is that what gets you through the podcast then?
Aye. You know, noticed I've been a bit quiet this week.
If you're young and impressionable and you have maybe I suppose the word I'm looking for is you might not necessarily have the skill you require.
Mm-hmm.
But you know you can see how you're going to get there, and you can see where the end goal is in mind. I suppose if you've got a lot of pressure on you to perform to that level,
How can I be a great alternative 90s guitarist?
and then
Heroin.
Fucking heroin, mate.
fucking that's all about the shop, isn't it?
Tried and tested.
Yeah, but everybody has it at that time. If you're in big bands,
Aye.
everyone's either around it or using it, or it's just generally seems to be in the scene or in alternative music in general.
In entertainment,
time,
all over
Yeah,
basically. It was heroin chic.
It was the Red Bull or the Monster energy drink of its day.
Aye, totally.
So
yeah,
that answers that question. I
So
guess.
massive drugs bust, problems, but she started the amps, and actually Kelly though was in the amps. But then Kelly was dropped from the amps because of ongoing drug problems. So when you see the amps videos, she's not in it. It's just a 4-piece, even though it was recorded as a 5. Yeah, so this was Kim, meant to be Kelly, who didn't, as we say, and Jim from the Breeders, plus another 2, a bassist and a guitarist, I believe.
Nick Farley, who ended up being in Guided by Voices.
Oh, is that who that
Yeah.
was? Oh, they
Yeah.
did a bunch of stuff together, didn't they?
Aye.
They collaborated a bunch of times.
Yeah.
Now, the Amps only had one album. They called it Pacer. They did, however, tour with things like Foo Fighters, Sonic Youth, and Guided by Voices. It's very much more pure indie pop rock. It's got a much stronger indie flavour to it.
We were high to high, breezing by.
The singles, including like the track Pacer, are much more simple, much more upbeat. The album tracks are a little bit more nuanced. It's decent. I don't like it as much as Breeders. It's a bit more straight down the line. But then what effectively happened is that with that new formation, she more or less changed the Amps name back to the Breeders and recommenced the Breeders with that different lineup. But they didn't actually record much until 2001. In 2001 they brought out this album called Title TK, which supposedly means title to come. I can only imagine come written with a K. And this is a funny one because friends of mine who are and have been for a long time into the Breeders really, really rate this album. I have reservations about this album. So it was suggested to me that this is as good as, if not a better choice of Unsung classics. I really don't side with that at all. I would say that I do agree that this album is definitely special in inverted commas, but I don't necessarily know if I mean that that's good. It's very idiosyncratic. I would say it's remarkable in its languidity. It's got a laziness to it it's purposeful, obviously, but laziness just permeates all the way through it. It's very laid back, and at times it's almost like anti-rock. At times it's almost willfully awkward. Like it
But I mean, there's definitely huge parts of Pod that are very lethargic.
this is actually one of my
it kind of runs through the band.
One of my points actually is that. So I would say it kind of deconstructs a lot of elements of chords and structure and melody and kind of refuses to oblige you by delivering them in a sort of simplified way. And when we get into Pod, we'll talk about the fact that Pod, to a lot of people, is an album of 2 halves, and I think the first half of Pod is very close to Title TK. It's much more unusual, a bit more offbeat. It doesn't flow quite as well, even though obviously I like it a lot. It is just a little bit harder to get your head round. I think Title TK for me walks like a really fine line between kind of cool, known sophistication. Like, I get that you have to have a slightly more sophisticated taste in alternative music to be into Title TK, but I think at times it strays into the territory of Emperor's New Clothes, like I was saying earlier on. I think at times it's just too cool for its own good, and the music sort of suffers as a result. It doesn't have anything like the repeated listens. For me, I get that I'm not, like, I get some of my friends certainly don't agree with that, but it doesn't have that quality to me. I like it. It's very clever, and I'm impressed by clever things. Well done. And there are some excellent tunes on it. I mean, the first track on it, Little Fury, it's
a good song.
Really good, really chill, but an excellent melody to it.
Why is it floating in
But then you've got tracks, I think, like Off You and The She, which I think are like 3 and 4 on it, which I just find really kind of meh, you know, really low energy and lazy in a sort of negative way. And I get that some people are just pure shouting this down right now, but I just can't get with it. The best aspects of this album, though, have definitely informed a lot of bands, because the looseness of it, there has been a big wave of bands. And actually a lot of like very female dominated bands that have embraced that loose alternative rock vibe. I think some that come to mind are the likes of Girlpool. And the band Chastity Belt. Have really kind of taken that sort of like slacker rock, alternative rock side of it and gone with that. I think also Honeyblood from Glasgow have a fair element of that to their stuff, although they've got a bit more of the kind of Veruca Salt power pop at times. But it's definitely had its sort of influences. I'm just not sure if over the course of the album I can't really be fucked with it, if I'm being honest. I definitely like dipping into certain tracks in it.
Yeah, I think it's got standout interesting bits, but yeah, I think you're right. As an album, I don't think it holds together.
Did you get through it much, Mark? It's a wee bit, if you're not familiar with that style, it's a wee bit a challenge.
It does amplify some of the points of the first half of Pod, which I didn't quite enjoy. So for me, it was a bit of a slog to get through. Yeah. I'm really familiar with that stuff, and even then I had to pick and choose from it. Now, in 2008, I think it was, another big gap, 2008 they brought out Mountain Battles, which I'll be honest is the album by them that I'm the least familiar with, because I find it a really confusing listen. I really struggle to get drawn into the album. It's very heavy on the production. The tracks are all produced in a very distinct direction. It's not really, the tracks aren't allowed to breathe, which is kind of the antithesis of what Albini has done with Pod. Again, we'll address that, but that's all about the performance and all about the songs, and very hands off on the production. This is the absolute opposite. I mean, even the first track in it, Overglazed, it's like a lo-fi band trying to sound like Twilight Sad or something like that. It's lightly produced, but then it's just reverbed and boosted to fuck. Like they're trying to make it sound really cavernous and huge and consuming, but you can hear that the ingredients within it are quite frail. It really doesn't work as a technique for me. I think there's tracks like Bang On, which kind of sounds a wee bit like some of Beck's sort of slightly unusual production, and then there's like tracks like Night of Joy, which is like a weird version of dream pop. I just, listening to it, I get too disorientated. It drags me in too many directions and just sounds like a collection of ideas as opposed to a coherent album. Did either of you get through it much? That was one I was also not as familiar with, although I did quite like Overglazed in a weird way. But I think for the most part, I think you're right. It feels all style and no substance, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and then the only other thing I've done, which is fairly recently, was an album called All Nerve, which is actually totally fine. Like I would not suggest it's a bad album. There's some really good moments on it. I think there's a track called Metagoth on it, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And there's a track, I think it's number 6, called Walking with a Killer, which I really liked, and I was surprised that I liked it actually, because it's stylistically maybe not what I'd typically go for, but it was just really well written, so I did really enjoyed it.
I know I should hide. I didn't know it was my night to die. But
It's totally a functional album, and if you like the Breeders, I don't think you'll dislike it. I just don't think it is setting anything on fire. It makes me feel a wee bit like their protégés caught up with them and maybe surpassed them. They're doing something that, as I mentioned, any number of bands like Girlpool, Chastity Belt, all these kind of bands, and many, many more besides, are now also doing, and they're not making advances on it. You know, it's just there, and they're now one of the pack, and it's a pack that they kind of helped create. And so I don't know if it's necessarily that flattering, but then again, it's not bad. And if you want to hear them, then I'm not going to stop you. But, yeah, so I'm kind of lukewarm on their last 3 albums. And as I say, there's absolutely no denying just how fucking terrific Last Splash is. And that kind of, I guess, brings us to Pod. But before we do that, you guys get any other observations on their back catalogue?
I think you pretty much covered that. If the last couple of records, the first 2 are the only 2 that really hold together for me.
Yeah, for me it's like, because they're a band that I was never into and have gone back, I'm very aware of their influence and how important they are as a band, and they're very of the time. And to me, there's no point in listening to their later stuff, which just sounds like them doing their earlier stuff. You should just go to the earlier stuff when it was actually important and vital. And in that way, you get the importance of it as well as the actual, you know, the artistic merit of it.
Charm of it,
For me personally, if it's not music that I'm necessarily drawn to anyway, if it doesn't have the influence, then I mean, it's fucking pointless. But I can totally appreciate the earlier 2 records, basically, that is kind of them in their pomp.
Yeah, it's amazing to think that it's actually amazing to kind of date what albums those first 2 Breeders records came before, because like I said, the Blue Album by Weezer and stuff like that, I mean, that seems like forever ago, but I mean, Pod was 4 years before that. And when you look at how ahead of their time or how trailblazing they were in terms of that alternative indie pop avenue, like it's pretty stunning that they were so far ahead of the game on that. And there's a lot of albums that start to sound like it that follow in the years immediately after that.
I think they're influential in a wide variety of genres as well. Like, you've got the indie pop stuff and like the shiny Weezer sort of stuff, but then you're
still seeing Weezer. Fucking hell.
And then, but even in like sort of post grungy stuff, and even Britpop,
you can hear a lot
big elements from this sort of stuff.
But the bands like Sleeper and Kinnicky and bands like that do definitely lift big bits of this. And, I mean, because they were sort of contemporaries of it, weren't they? So they were like 93, 94, 95, 96, that kind of era. And this was only a few years prior, so it was still fresh at that point. And its influence, I mean, Echo Belly probably to some extent. I
was thinking as well, sometimes a band can take a hiatus or take time off and come back and still feel like they're on it. Time hasn't been kind to them in that regard, I don't think. You know, when it feels like they're coming back, there's like they've missed a step.
It's also true of the Pixies.
That is also a fair observation. But I think some bands can do it, like Iron Maiden. Some bands, even then, their later stuff isn't amazing, but it still feels as though it's in step.
Yeah, it's solid.
You know, I think there's also an element though of certain styles of music are kinder to the retro. You know, they're
because they were very sort of quite groundbreaking. They're also very of that era, whereas metal will always be timeless. But you know,
it is
it's
definitely a genre that has that. I mean, it's like if you came back and did, you know, sort of krautrock. You can do krautrock now that sounds exactly like krautrock in the 80s and still be a great band, and people don't say, "Oh, that's shite, they sound like krautrock." It's like, well, that's what they're trying to do. And to some extent that's the case with metal. The production changes, but metal has a sort of slight timelessness to it that even sometimes people love the fact that something sounds dated. That's what draws them to it, if it sounds like Bay Area thrash.
Whereas indie and like alternative rock like this dates, because it's trying to be maybe not fashionable but like anti-fashionable, therefore dates a lot quicker because it's cooler at the time, and then it's tied to
it is cooler. The genres that are there seems to be there's
it's like fashion. You know, if you wear what's in fashion right now, you will look like an idiot in 5 years.
Never going to
whereas
be
if you if you just wear a plaid shirt and a t-shirt and jeans, you're just going to always be not that cool. But you're not going to you're going to have a timeless wardrobe, Chris.
Okay, we're going to have a conversation after this podcast.
I was going to say, like, all the metal observations are definitely true, but I think Weezer is also a good example of a band that hasn't taken...
Excuse me, Mark, it's pronounced Weezer.
Sorry, Weezer.
I'm changing all band names to be coronavirus related. Do you not realise that?
Okay. But yeah, you might not really have much truck with their later stuff, but at least it doesn't feel like they've missed a step. You know, it feels like they're always hanging around that sound, and that sound hasn't been cool for a long time, and they know it. Rivers has come very acutely aware of it, but it doesn't really care. But it doesn't feel as though they're trying to ape past glories either. It's like a callback to that, as opposed to trying to do that again.
That fucking Red album was a bit of that shit, when I know. No, the one before that, what was it called?
The one after that, Raditude, I think, you know.
There was one of them. It was fucking.
There's a lot of them that are fucking hellish.
Howling.
We've been through that.
anyway, right, okay. So Pod by the Breeders came out in 1990. As we say, a lot of it was inspired by Kim's frustrations at being sort of marginalised within the Pixies as a songwriter, and that was frankly the Pixies' loss. Frankly, Frank Blackley.
Blackley.
Now, David, Mark, which one of you mentioned Kurt Cobain?
That was
both
I think I did.
Yeah,
first,
so
maybe,
Kurt Cobain's journals actually mentioned this record repeatedly as being one of his favourites. Kurt Cobain, despite being a fully grown adult, apparently listed his favourite albums in his journals regularly.
Can I just say, do we think that this has an influence on Nirvana going forward?
Hugely.
Yeah.
Aye, 100%.
They recorded in utero with Albini,
That's
largely influenced by this
exactly
album.
what I was thinking.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the sonics of it are.
There's even some, I was going to say, like as we go through, there's some chord progressions and stuff like that I think Kurt then apes.
I don't think he would even for a moment suggest that was anything other than totally true. Like,
Yeah.
he was unabashedly a huge fan of this record. They did say that when they were asked about working with Albini, it was stuff like PG Harvey and the Breeders that really influenced that decision. And funnily enough, Steve Albini says this is by far one of his favourite records he ever worked on. The emphasis on this record was really on the performances and the takes and the art of it, the personality of it. Apparently he very rarely did any more than 2 takes, which caused a little bit of like disagreements.
Well,
at
he's
times,
also credited as engineer rather than producer.
He always is.
that's his thing.
But yeah,
in sort of later years they did interviews about this, and they said, look, he's been a wee bit shy there. Like Steve did have some input into the music. For example, he apparently encouraged them to pull back in the number of vocal layers and harmonies. He was like, some of these the songs work better if you just let that central vocal line really shine through. So I mean, it seems like he had a big role to play, maybe in an understated fashion. But
I think the production really stands out on this record.
It's outstanding. And when you know, we've made comments on this before about how Albini can sometimes be grossly overrated for certain works. You know, some things just don't work, and I've heard stuff he's done that has sucked, but the way the guy got his reputation is based on like exemplary bits of work like this. I mean, it really is like he's done such a good job of it. The dynamics in it are incredible. There's tunes that are so quiet that then explode out, and it's all done based on the takes. It's not studio trickery. It's not a, you know, him getting right in deep into the production, and you know, it's a really lively album in that sense. It's got loads of ups and downs, loads of room and headroom, and
I have to say I much prefer the production on this than Last Splash.
I had the producer though, right? So he engineered that, and then some produced it afterwards. Is that right?
But Last Splash doesn't to me have the dynamics, even though I don't know, it's, you know, famous like Cannibal's actually
record.
quite quiet and big, but yeah, it just seems a lot more within those, like a sort of flattened EQ, whereas this it just sounds way more organic and alive.
I think it was a big push though for that sort of alternative radio, because this is obviously Cannibal and all that came out in 93. That's after the Nirvana explosion when everything was signed, and the notion then was that, oh my god, this music can actually make a lot of money. Bearing in mind when this came out, people just assumed it was, you know, 50,000 was a big selling album, and then Nirvana were selling 15 million. So they realised the commercial potential, and I think the emphasis then moved a bit with regards to production. They were like, oh, why should we make this lo-fi? Let's make it really big. And it did work to some extent, because Divine Hammer and Cannibal were very radio friendly, huge in student radio. Now it's interesting, the Pod was recorded in Edinburgh.
Palladium Studio.
Palladium Studio, which
I don't know if
is
that's
gone
still
now.
there.
It was near Comiston in the south of the city, and a lot of bands recorded there actually. Prefab Sprout, Dave. The Cocktail Twins recorded 2 of their biggest albums there. Run Rig recorded The Cutter and the Clan.
I mean, that's an album.
Yep, totally.
next week.
I genuinely, my parents had that CD. It was fucking great.
Yeah, man. I went to see them at that big concert in Stirling when I was a kid as well. Also, the Bay City Rollers recorded in there. Cool bit of Bay City Rollers goes. This almost made my nexus, but I'll throw it in. The Bay City Rollers, Les McKeown was fucking absolutely mad for the coke at the time.
Yeah.
During the sessions for the album that they recorded at Palladium, one night Les McKeown broke back into the studio to destroy the tapes for the album because he was unhappy with how it was sounding.
That's wonderful. So,
A good lad.
do we know why the studio vanished, or do we know anything around this?
Not really.
No, we should do some research.
Yeah, I'm not
If
really sure what
you-
happened to Palladium. It lasted. I mean, I've seen the guy that worked at Palladium moved on to work in other studios. I think he actually lives in Stirling now, in like the Riverside area, or one of the guys that worked there. I don't know what happened to the rest of them, but I mean, it had. So 4AD used to send loads of their acts to Palladium. That was their go-to studio for their sort of, I don't say lower budget acts, but the acts they were kind of like
Developing.
Yeah, that was the affordable studio where they used to send people. Apparently they were given, was it about 2 weeks to record this, and they actually finished the album inside a week because the studio sessions were so productive and efficient. And then they ended up getting in touch with John Peel, who sent a film crew to the studio, and then they filmed a live session, which then I think went on to become the video for one of the tracks. So it was like a really like thickened time in Edinburgh for the band. They also supposedly recorded the album mostly in their pyjamas, and including going to the pub in their pyjamas after it down in the south of Edinburgh.
That's really interesting because you can tell that is a well-oiled machine. That probably comes from Kim's days and the Pixies, having that.
Well, also though, it also comes from the other members. It comes from Tanya Donnelly being in Throwing Muses, and they're no slouches, and Britt being in Slint.
Of course,
it's actually quite a lot of calibre in the band. That nobody was a slouch. But I think Kim driving the project, really, as you say, she's very focused and really experienced. Plus she'd worked with Steve Albini as well on the Pixies album, so I think there was already a good relationship there. She knew she could work well with the guy. Apparently the relationships in the studio were really good for the album, really smooth. The occasional argument about takes, mostly about the guitarist wanting to redo the takes and then Steve refusing. Then the next day them saying, "Alright Steve, you were right, sorry." But yeah, apparently a really smooth process that allowed them to do that Peel session. We were talking earlier on about how that first half of the album really reminds me more, sorry, I don't want to put words in your mouth, of Title TK. That loose, slow, irregular, less consistent sort of feel. I think the second half of the album is much closer to the sort of Pixies pop of Gigantic. You hear a lot more of the bigger tunes, and there's a lot of tunes in the second half of the album, maybe 3 or maybe even 4, that could quite easily have been really strong Pixies songs. I think in the first half, we'll go through them, but in the first half there's maybe only one. I actually really like the first half, and that's obviously the half with the Beatles cover that we'll discuss, but it is definitely a more irregular and more alternative and a little bit more obtuse set of songs.
Yeah.
But that second side of the vinyl is marked by its the melodic accessibility of it, definitely, which heralded, I think, Last Splash, but also paved the way for other bands as well on the back of it. The first tune, Glorious, for example, is so understated. Like it's almost kind of dirgy in its own way. It's a really odd choice to open a record like this. I mean, in retrospect, it works because you see how much the record pays off in the long run. It's definitely a tough first impression. It's got like the hard panned guitars in it. It's got like obviously a lot of Albini's use of room ambience, but it's very druggy. It's patient. It does have like a kind of quiet confidence to it. I think. Obviously, they know the other songs have got up their sleeves, and Kim Deal is already a very confident performer, but there is a self-assuredness about it, but it's definitely slacker rock. It's
an interesting album opener statement, like band statement. It's like they're not coming out with a single first track. You might think that she wants to try and prove something, but she's like, no, I'm releasing an album. Not just a band with songs.
A bunch of songs, yeah. And lo and behold, with the second track, Doe, the pace really quickens.
I want to win.
It's got some really nice playful vocal touches in it. It's the first time that you hear those, those little characteristic whimsical things that are in Pixies songs, like like weird little funny, like almost moments of sort of gentle comedy that are used to kind of accentuate the feel of the song. This one's got a lot of that in it. It kind of is a little bit akin to a sort of stripped back version of the band Silver Sun Pickups, who followed years and years later, and you can see where they got a lot of their ideas from at this kind of era of alternative rock. I
think you start to pick up on how nice the production is as well.
Yeah, totally. That's the pop on the snare is so lovely.
Yeah, like the drums sound really roomy. You're like, oh, I can hear the room that kit is played in, but it works really well. But yeah, then her vocals are really mic'd really close.
They're
so
quite
it's like
low in the mix.
But they're low in the mix, but like quite intimate. But yeah, the mix works really well.
It's odd structure, the way it stops at the end is like they do it quite a lot on their records, which I think is probably maybe, I don't know if it's an obvious way of doing it, but maybe an obvious kind of nod to not making it as super video friendly, because you're kind of messing structure up just a little bit.
Yeah, you don't get the feeling that that's high in the agenda.
Yeah,
absolutely. They're not going, right, let's get this chorus popping.
So the elephant in the room, Happiness is a Worm Gun.
Yeah,
what a fucking outstanding cover.
Man in the crowd with the multicolored mirrors on his hobnail boots, lying with his eyes while his hands are busy working overtime.
There's one of the better Beatles covers out there for sure. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. They nail it because they kind of deconstruct it a little bit and go fucking wonk on it. But
yeah, voice is fucking so good, man. She really nails Lennon, which is hard to do.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, I have to admit, I'm not, as you know, a massive Beatles connoisseur. More of a Queen man myself.
Fucking hell.
Although I'm up for hearing their take on Queen. Who Wants to Live Forever would be a treat. But I didn't actually immediately recognise what this song was when I first heard this album.
I mean, it's not one of the most famous Beatles singles, but it is on the White Album. It was
one of my favourite Beatles songs.
Yeah,
I mean, it's tremendous. It's tonally as well. It's tremendous. Like the lyrics of it are fucking brilliant. I mean, I will give them that.
The reimagining of it is the best thing, because obviously the song's about heroin abuse and or opium, I guess it would have been at the time, and Lennon's version of it, or the Beatles version of it, is very understated almost. You could have went in this direction as well, and obviously they clearly have, and it really works to the benefit of the song. It gives it a whole new dimension.
Those big staccato guitar chops in it are tremendous. It starts off though very, very subdued, like almost imperceptible, and it ends almost imperceptibly as well with the Happiness is a Worm Gun refrain. But there's some big ostentatious kind of moments in it. I really love, like you said, that sort of semi-spoken lead vocal that runs through it. There's about 50 seconds in the kind of serpentine guitar line that she brings in, with it followed by that big crash, the falsetto double vocal in it before that big crescendo, Mother Superior crescendo. I mean, it's such a dynamic song. I mean, it really is. The like up and down and left and right. It's fucking brilliant. It's all over the spectrum. You see the waveform, even the post-mastered waveform is just a fucking mountain range, and it's so unusual these days to see that. Yeah. I mean, absolutely brilliant. I think Albini's production is fucking peerless on that song. It's captured brilliantly, and it is definitely one of the best Beatles covers I've ever heard. They followed that with OH exclamation mark, which is this
cello, man, so good.
Is it not violin?
I think it's violin.
I think it's violin. Yeah. Again, it's this really quite languid and quite dreamy track, a bit akin to sort of Title TK, but it's a lot sweeter. I think it's got a much nicer sentiment behind it. There's something much more gentle and romantic about it.
Yeah, and I quite like the wee touch of male vocal that comes in.
Yeah, it's quite nice.
And I think it's actually, it calls to mind some of Albini's work with the likes of Scout Niblet, who does a lot of that kind of minimalist, slightly loose, slow, lazy alternative rock, but with really kind of sweet melodies kind of woven through it. It's a brilliant track, really.
The end is very Bowie-esque. the way that changes. That's something that he did quite a lot. Also, see the acoustic guitar on the right channel. It sounds like it costs like £100. It sounds like a really cheap guitar.
It's funny.
But it works though.
There's a couple of bits in this album, actually, like you said, where I couldn't tell if the guitar was nylon or steel stringed.
Yeah.
And I think it's because it's either an inexpensive steel string guitar that's just really dull and hasn't been restrung, or it's like a weirdly set up nylon guitar.
Yeah.
There's something really weird about it in Dark. Hellbound, the fifth one, which I think is the one that came out as a single.
Yeah, it's the one that looks forward to the more popular sort of radio-friendly sort of stuff. It's got a chorus that sticks out.
It's kind of and a definite. It's the candidate on the first half that could have been a Pixies tune.
Yeah, definitely.
It's very Pixies-esque for sure.
The double kind of cheery vocal in it is very, very hard. Did you see what it was about?
Yeah, can't remember.
It's fucking mental. It's about a fetus that survives an abortion.
Yeah.
And the band apparently used to make fun of her for the lyrics in it, because it's got one of the lyrics is "It lives despite the knives internal," which she admits.
Pretty metal.
She admits it. Yeah, exactly. Are definitely the worst lyrics she's ever written. But she was like, I had to record, didn't have anything else, so I just went with it.
See that guitar on the right side again? It sounds like an overdriven acoustic with an overdrive pedal in front of it.
Yeah,
that's what it sounds like.
Not an acoustic that's been driven over.
It could also be that too.
Yeah, it's funny that this is the one that was the single and the most poppiest, because it's one of my least favourites.
Yeah, I'm not mad in it
Because
either.
it's so kind of straightforward. It's not deconstructed. It's not what I kind of like about this record.
Yeah, I think it arrives at a good point. You know, you need a little dose of energy, but
yeah,
it's
true.
just not one of my favourite tunes, but it works in the context of the album for the flow. Track 6, When I Was a Painter.
You brought the essentials, perversion, appeal, and many lovers at one time.
Another really upbeat one. Has little hints of like some of McCluskey's kind of more lo-fi guitar-y stuff.
I think there's a chord change in this that I think Kurt basically just ripped off.
It's Mud Honey. It's a Mud Honey chord change. That's what that is.
Oh yeah, and then it's also Aneurysm as well on Incesticide. He's just taken it.
There's, I mean, I think there's also a feature in this, which is the little guitar licks, like the second guitar licks that go through it. Are
Yeah, and
a lot
the
of bands
violin
use.
is really nice.
See that a really big fat lead guitar tone that comes in at 2 minutes 15. I heard that and I was like, I love that sound. Why is that sound there?
Yeah,
I don't
totally.
really care why it's there, but it sounds fucking great.
That's one of the ones as well that I think benefits from Albini asking them to strip back the amount of vocals that were on the songs. Track 7, which I believe was the first side of the first track on the second side of the vinyl, which is, as I say, the side that's kind of sort of known for being closer to their Pixies / Last Splash kind of era, the much bigger pop. It's called Fortunately Gone.
Toes are too sweetly as it drops upon your head, just like it did today. Fortunately gone, bum, bum, bum. I wait for you.
And I think it really sounds like I say underproduced in the sense that not as set up as a single, but it sounds like a kind of slightly underdone Pixies outtake, but in a very, very good way, because I mean, as I said, that some of my favourite Pixies stuff is the B-sides and things like that, and that really sits in comfortably with that sort of stuff.
See, I couldn't give a shit about this track.
No?
There's nothing for me.
For me, it has that, especially lead guitar, has like a really kind of laid back country vibe. I don't know why I got that feel from.
Yeah, no, it's kind of slight Americana, but twangly thing going on. I don't know, but
I like the harmonies in it though. I think the vocal harmonies.
See, I made a note of the harmonies. I thought they were really good as well. Yeah. Track 8, Iris, is also another very Pixies-esque tune, albeit it's I think it's the longest track on the album because it's got quite I would say laboured, but it's got quite an indulgent section in the middle where they sort of go to town on the performance.
Sister,
yeah, but this is the one where they're like definitely trying stuff out with time signatures, and
yeah.
I actually really like this track.
Yeah, I love how this track drops to almost zero at one point. It's another one of those ones where the dynamic is really to the fore, and it's got a really, again, I'm just citing loads of Albini's other work, but the combination of his sound with certain songwriting techniques and structures, this reminds me a lot of like a dry era PG Harvey. The early stuff where it's slightly more rock.
It's also the one on the record that I think you hear a big slinty sound on it as well.
Opened, number 9, which I think is the purest Pixies kind of influence song on it.
Robin flies again.
I think that
Druggy, right? Okay.
what?
Dark and druggy, I would say.
I think that is the song that Bossa Nova as a Pixies album was really missing. It's absolutely their
I
loss.
can see it's a big fun live one, and it's just it builds and builds.
It's like the spoken lyrical vibe is like something that Pixies started to lose. I think as it felt a little bit more forced. But it remains really catchy. It really rocks out at the end, and I think it's like a total highlight of this album. Really, really strong song.
Love the bass tone on that as well, a bit clanky motherfucker.
It is, yeah. Only in Threes, number 10, which, I mean, it's another missed opportunity for the Pixies. It's got a wee bit, I think it's the track Here Comes Your Man. Like the chorus of the song has like big flavours of Here Comes Your Man. There's just one particular line that alludes to that.
I think her voice, her personality really shines on this track. Yeah, and I think maybe the album needs that a little bit because she's faded out a little bit.
And that's the genius
I really
of
like
Albini as well, is to let the personality come through from the performances.
Yeah,
rather
totally.
than squashing them all out.
Which is kind of what this album is about. It's about her
all
flexing her
personality.
artistic and personal. Yeah. I think the verses are a bit meh, but I really like the chorus.
Yeah. Track 11, Limehouse, really kind of cheeky riff in this one, centred kind of around that sort of quite playful guitar hook. And I think the chorus in that again is pure vintage Pixies.
This is the one time where I just thought I wish they were a little bit tighter.
Oh yeah.
I don't know, there's like just maybe some of the plucking is just not quite on it, but that's fine.
That's a Gojira fan in you.
Well, yeah, exactly. I know. Like, where are these breakdowns coming from?
But yeah, I mean, I think even listening to that, you can practically hear how the Pixies might have played it. And yeah, maybe the takes. I mean, there's no getting away from the fact that like Joey Santiago and Frank Black are fucking tremendous on the guitar, their choice of tones and stuff. So yeah, maybe the takes might have been a bit more accomplished or a bit more experienced.
But I mean, you wouldn't change the record for it.
Yeah, you wouldn't grudge it. And then 12, Metal Man. Which is a really interesting, really understated ending to the album. Really, you notice the hard pan in the vocals. He's listening to the headphones. It was kind of unusual, and it recorded at this like really, really low level, or at like until 1 minute 24, and it just bursts into life just once, loud, and then back to almost
disintegrates
zero.
again.
Yeah, it's a really clever little teasing little ending. I think is just it fits perfectly in the album. It's a really nice conclusion. I mean, I think the album's fucking bags of character, like so much personality, and it's been perfectly transmitted via Albini's, capture and recording engineering of it. I think it's just a great snapshot of a moment. I think that's what he's managed to do.
Yeah,
is really get that band in their element, and Kim Deal writing some awesome tunes, clearly trying to maybe prove a point as well that she should have been allowed more influence in Pixies, and I think most people are fairly convinced of that.
Yeah, especially after releasing a record like this and then Pixies just kind of going to rot a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to overstate the or understate, say, the quality of the later Pixie stuff. It is still good, but they'd set the bar so fucking ridiculously high that it was going to be tough to maintain it. And I think Frank Black's maybe just a part of his personality, maybe. I you don't want to judge a guy, you can't be in that position, but I think he made a mistake by not allowing Kim into the process more, because it could have given them at least a third really truly great album rather than just 2 more good albums.
So what do we think then, gents?
I would love to see it in. I think it's a really interesting phenomenon, a really interesting moment, and it's, like I said, it's so much personality, and it's overlooked, it's way overshadowed by the album that followed it.
Yeah, I think you should go in as well. I'm into it.
I really like it, actually. It's not necessary. It's one of these ones that I can see how it's not perfect at all, but I much prefer it actually to the one that came after, because
Last Splash,
Last Splash, because I just much prefer the production and I like the personality of it. I enjoy how imperfect it is, and the fact that it's just kind of chucked together and see how it sounds, and it really works.
Cool.
It's a charming record.
Yeah, consensus achieved.
Indeed.
There you go.
So yeah, into it.
Yeah. Mark, what should people do to register their approval?
Go to Facebook and vote.
Facebook.com/unsungpod.
I wonder if Todd from Nails will vote this one in.
I hope so.
Oh yeah.
How's he getting on?
Todd.
I see you're wearing their shirt. Is that so he leaves you alone?
Yeah, just so he knows that it wasn't me that was slagging him off. But I mean, that's got a lot of votes for yes. So it does, funnily enough.
Yeah, a ridiculous amount of interaction.
Speaking of votes, or the Orbital episode, we've just found out ended 50-50.
Yeah,
which is the first time that's ever happened.
Yeah, so we're just going to leave it on a seesaw until the end of time.
We should maybe get a tiebreaker from somewhere.
Yeah,
competition.
So it's Nexus time, and I believe somebody from Twitter last week,
Catalyze,
chose Zippy from Rainbow.
Rainbow being a
British television show from the 80s.
This is the first time we're seeing Nexus tonight. Will it be the last? What do they have in store for us? Not good for
Why am I here? You're in the Nexus. This is the Nexus. For you, this is what you
want. I'll go first. David, putting in a couple of big flavours for you here, because I know your ambition to get that second pod off the ground.
Oh, baby.
The Breeders, one of the founding members was a woman called Josephine Wiggs. Josephine Wiggs, her dad was a guy called Richard Wiggs, and Richard Wiggs founded the Anti-Concorde Project. The Anti-Concorde Project was a campaign against Concorde aircraft for various reasons, and like fuel consumption and noise pollution was a big one. With
it's too fast. It's too fast.
Too goddamn fast. He was the main voice really behind the Anti-Concorde Project, and then a bunch of other celebrities came on. I think Alec Guinness at one point was an advocate. Anyway, in 1985, for her 85th birthday, the Queen Mother was allowed to fly a Concorde.
Holy Jesus!
She was taken up to the cockpit of the Concorde and allowed to take the controls briefly. And that was her 85th birthday present. Now the Queen Mother has a daughter called the Queen.
Oh yeah.
That's our born name. It's the Queen.
It was lucky. She was born to be.
So apparently the Queen once had a conversation with a guy called Sir Boyd Tunnock. Now, Sir Boyd Tunnock is the head of the Tunnocks.
Once had a conversation with. Can you provide photographic evidence of?
Hang on, it's relevant. Sir Boyd Tunnock is the head of the Tunnock Empire, which in Scotland is only the finest biscuits and tea cakes, wafers, caramel logs.
Genuinely the best. Like
amazing.
I really miss them.
So Sir Boyd Tunnock was chatting to the Queen because apparently the Queen is a really big fucking fan of Tunnock's tea cakes.
Let's cancel them.
But
they're done.
It's not their fault.
But not a big fan of Tunnock's wafers.
She's I can
wrong one.
She is
the tea cake's the best. Snowball is the second best. I do like a log, then a wafer.
Wafers at the bottom of your league?
I think so.
That's dark.
I'm just not a big wafer fan.
Oh,
So the Queen,
Dave.
the Queen and Sir Boyd Tunnock.
I don't like a Kit
had a
Kat.
wee blether about that, and then he went on the record about it. So in 1983, Tunnocks sponsored the football team Albion Rovers.
I see where you're going here.
Bridges
Now,
finest.
Albion Rovers actually for that season ended up with basically a Tunnocks wrapper as their strip. It was like notoriously like the colour scheme, and it was like the caramel. I think it's caramel wafer that's got the stripes in. As part of that design. In January 1963, Albion Rovers played Dundee United in a really famous Scottish Cup tie. There was a really, really bad winter in 62 into 63, and flooding and frost and things like that. And this was before undersoil heating existed. So basically the pitch at Tannadice, which is Dundee United's home park, was destroyed, and they tried to get it into condition. They tried to thaw it quick, and it just further damaged the ground. So reputedly, the reason for Dundee United's nickname as the Arabs. Now, some people query this. They say this is actually not true, but in a lot of places it's reported that the reason is because Dundee shipped in all this sand to spread in the pitch, and then the referee, keen to get the cup tie to take place, agreed to let them play it, despite the fact that it was basically beach football at that point. The Dundee, as I say, went on to be called the Arabs. Now, it just so happens that a TV host called Geoffrey Hayes was a huge Dundee United fan. Geoffrey Hayes was the main guy behind Rainbow, the face of it, Geoffrey. And during the sort of, what would you call it, the design process, the conception of the show, Zippy was originally meant to be blue, and dark blue is the colour of Dundee United's
Football Club
derby rivals, Dundee FC. So Geoffrey, as a huge Dundee United fan, arranged for Zippy to be a sort of orangey colour, and that is why Zippy is that hue. So there you go.
Wonderful.
Great work, Mark.
I also have a football link in mind.
Oh, ideal. I was going to do the Dundee United, but I ended up not doing it, so great work.
Good.
So the artwork for Pod was done. I don't have notes for this, so I'm just going right off the top of my head. So if it's a little bit inaccurate, I do apologise. So the artwork for this album was done by Vaughan Oliver, who was.
Can we just say it's a weird, blurry image of a fertility dance with a man wearing a skirt of eels.
Yeah, that's actually Vaughan Oliver. I think that's in the photo, and his friend took it for him. But he was like the house artist for 4AD at the time. We did a lot of stuff with the Pixies and all that as well. Vaughan Oliver is actually a Sunderland native. Sunderland used to play at Roker Park before they moved to Stadium of Light in 1997. In 1992, they played an FA Cup final with Liverpool, and they released a single called The Roker Rave, and he was asked to design the cover for it.
All right.
Yeah, and it's quite the tune. I think you should.
Are you going to make me get a clip of it?
I think you should definitely put a clip of it in here.
I'll stick it in here.
So Sunderland's get quite a lot of famous people from that city. One of them is just off the top of my head, but the keyboardist in Deep Purple was from Sunderland.
His name we obviously know because he's that famous.
Roy something, can't remember his surname, sorry.
Famous as fuck.
But one of the people who is from Sunderland is actually an actor that I quite like called Callum Keith Rennie. You might have seen him, and he's been on loads of American TV shows. He usually plays a bad guy. So Callum Keith Rennie played one of the antagonists in Battlestar Galactica. He was also joined by another English actor who played a lawyer called I can't remember the guy's name. I can't remember the actor. Sorry, fuck. This is why I should have had my notes written down. Jesus Christ. Anyway, basically,
wait a minute, folks. The Doug gave Mark's homework.
Yeah, I know. So Callum Keith Rennie was in Battlestar Galactica, and he was also joined by
keeping all of that.
many other British actors. One of them was Mark Sheppard. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of a thing called double casting, where an actor has basically been plays a role, and then somebody else from his family then plays a later version, i.e. their dad or their mother or whatever. That Mark Sheppard was in Doctor Who, and his dad played an older version of him in the same episode because, you know, time travel and shit in Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And the person that voiced Zippy in Rainbow was a man called Roy Skelton, who was the original voice of the Daleks and the Cybermen in Doctor Who.
There you go.
That was seamless.
Oh my god. So at one point the Breeders appeared in Buffy the Vampire Slayer
as
a house band in the whatever the go-to hangout was.
What was the name of that? My wee sister's a huge Buffy fan. I should know that.
Yeah, that was like a total thing because I always used to go there, and that was like bands appeared in it quite a lot, and the Breeders were on there, and they actually wrote a song for it that they ended up playing quite a lot live. Anyway, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the TV series rather than the original film, starred Sarah Michelle Gellar, Alison Hannigan, and of course a Mr. Anthony Head.
Anthony Head,
who was famous for his role as Rupert Giles in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He has also done stuff recently in British comedies, but that was like his huge international US TV thing. He first came to prominence as part of the Gold Blend couple.
He did.
The famous Nescafe
the tension
soap opera adverts of the late 80s. So it was he and an actress called Sharon Mohan, and there was 12 different adverts between 1987 and 1993 that sort of had this really cheesy 80s will they won't they romance in a sort of soap opera vibe, but it was just 45-second adverts for shit instant coffee.
That's a long advert.
Yeah, and then there ended up being like sequels in the late 90s and stuff like that, but
I for one was glued to the screen. Sharon
Mohan has gone on to do loads of British TV shit.
She married Bungle.
Well, no, she's now on Loose Women.
All right,
as a guest panelist.
Oh fucking hell!
She's not a host, but she's a guest panelist. Loose Women at one point featured
Zippy,
a guest Anne Robinson,
maybe George
from Watchdog and The Weakest Link fame, who slagged off Wales in Room 101 as well. She said that they were irritating and annoying. The Welsh.
Oh, she wanted to put the Welsh, the sea mammal.
No, she wanted to put the Welsh into Room 101.
All right, okay.
But
classic Potter.
Her biggest thing probably after Watchdog was then The Weakest Link.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking like
famous.
The headmistress that you were always scared of.
Absolutely, became famous for her wink. And what was the phrase again?
You are the weakest link.
You are the weakest link. Goodbye. Anyway, at one point, Zippy from Rainbow was the weakest link and appeared on The Weakest Link, and he didn't get many questions right.
Wow. So
there you go.
That was wonderful.
All right, next is time.
So we already mentioned we're going to be doing the Misfits. Which album?
Static Age.
Static Age. Yeah,
technically their first record, but never released as their first record.
Yeah, it's going to be a complex one, I'm sure. The chronology. Mark, what's the Nexus subject?
It is. Please give us more of your suggestions, by the way.
Keep them coming.
The best one will not get coronavirus. It is Patrick Bateman by Mark Robertson.
Mark Robertson.
Matt Robertson said
Patrick Robertson Bateman. Said Patrick Bateman.
Patrick Bateman.
Yeah.
A character from a book.
Well, a serial killer and a band who quite like serial killers. I can't imagine how easy that's going to be.
Yeah, that's true. All right. So next week we have our special guest Anna in, and we'll see you then. And then also check our Facebook and stuff for updates about our radio show. That might be on Tuesday night. We don't know.
Maybe the following Tuesday.
Probably.
No.
We'll yeah. Anyway, that's exciting.
Okay.
Right. Bye.
Bye.